Good day and welcome back to Elementary 72 Gaming. Before I get into this video, I'd like to ask you all to please leave a like or comment on my video and consider subscribing to my channel. Now, the developers of the game left us with a very nice challenge. 20 things that we can see that annoy players within the game. So I'm actually going to do this here because I've done plenty of videos in the past. However, I'm going to do it in as fast as possible. I did another video trying to do it. It took me almost an hour. So yeah, 20 problems isn't so easy to explain, but I'm going to do it with as little explanation as possible so that I can try and get through the list. And I'm just going to label them as 1, 2, 3 as I go through so that I reach 20 instead of 50 or 60. There are literally that many problems in the game, so don't worry. Number 1, the super fast increase curve of difficulty. Now, this here doesn't go with just, it's actually a broad spectrum analysis. The difficulty of the game went from a curve that was reasonable to a curve that became unreasonable. It caused the difficulty to climb up to a massive level, and some of it was understandable. However, other parts of the difficulty increase became annoyingly ridiculous, and it made certain classes of ships impossible to use within the tech level, and that I will get into later in this video when I get to those particular annoyances. So that was number 1. Number 2, nerfing and changing of the systems within the game. Now, nerfing and changing. The first thing I'm going to touch on the nerfing and changing is going to be the weapon systems. There is another nerfing and changing section within this here. I'm going to cover it later. When they nerfed and changed weapons, they interfered with the largest portion of the game's weapon, the rapid missile launcher. Now, the rapid missile launcher was the most OP weapon in the game, and it was reasonably used by most of the players. Touching it really caused havoc in the community. Just mentioning touching it caused them to lose players, and the fact that they went through with still doing that update meant that they really didn't care about their gameplay base. That is what the message was to the players. They interfered with the majority and they paid the price in terms of users. That is where the game lost a lot of growth. Right, so let's move on to number 3. Number 3, the introduction of too many debuffs at once. Disruptor technology was fine on its own. Scramblers being introduced at the same time was a big problem. Interdictors being introduced at the same time was also a major clash. It allowed players to do way too much, way too fast. So that was the third on my list. That was the biggest problem introduced. Too many things introduced all at once to the game caused a lot of difficulty in gameplay. It caused a lot of players to lose gameplay style. The ability to run away from being blocked with the warp stabilizer was removed with interdictor bubbles, and that was the end of it. It made that whole aspect of the game worthless. A very expensive item became devalued overnight. Moving on, let's get to the next aspect, the change in the mechanics for anomalies and non-player enemies. The NPC enemies, obviously anomalies and missions and scouts, became more difficult to fight because of the high usage of debuff technology with high efficiency. So that was the fourth big problem, right? I'm just going to leave it at that. The high efficiency caused activities to become longer than they should be. It only prolonged the activity. So that was the fourth list of problems on this entire situation. Problem number 5, the reduction of bounties within activities. The reduction of bounties made things really chaotic. The amount of regular spend on the game became rather irregular, and it started to fly up in value really fast. Players didn't want large teams, they'd rather have a smaller team to increase the amount of ISK they actually had within their control. This was a major problem to the game. This here was not something very easily explained, and it happened within a very short period. It was unexplainable to most players. Most players didn't even understand how bad the impact was till much later. So there was the fifth problem on the list. The sixth problem, reduction of loot and the reduction of rewards from reprocessing materials. So that is the sixth problem. They eliminated a massive play of market play in the game. And that is what's ruined a lot of the play for us right now. And that is why a lot of players have quit the game as well. So that was the sixth problem that was introduced in rapid succession. The seventh problem was the reduction of the spawn of rare anomalies. So they reduced the spawn rate of Inquisitors, Scouts, and Dead Spacers. This has caused a lot of annoyance to players. It has infuriated the community, and it is causing activities to become extremely monotonous. So that is the seventh on the list. Let's move on. The removal of safety aspects from the game. So originally when the game started, there was offline autopiloting. The removal of the system as rapid as it happened, and the fact that it became easy to gank players, was a major no-no to the community. That is the eighth thing that happened. It is something that has affected the game drastically. Right, moving on. The next thing that really affected the community heavily would be botting within the game. Now, players will play multiple accounts because of the fact that it takes months to years to master any aspect of the game. So playing with 3 or 4 accounts at once to get them to expert level or high level earnings for each of the activities was a good thing. And that is one of the reasons why players play with multiple accounts. However, within this same aspect came the reason why players are now playing with heavily saturated number of accounts and using automated programs to complete the easy tasks for them. So mining is one of the easiest, and there was the introduction of botting due to poor regulation on the game. So if a person was allowed to have 3 logins per any single account, that would have been fine, and 3 characters could be running at the same time. That would have also been fine. 3 characters in the background getting training, so you just swap between your 3 characters, easy peasy, and nobody would really have that much of a problem. A maximum of 9 players for a person, so that would give you a lot of activity. It would allow you to do a lot of things within the game. So that was it for the 9th problem. The 10th problem: glitches and lagging in high-end activities. Now, when you are spawning in large activities, so when activities are with 40 or more players or 40 or more ships within an activity, you tend to get a slight amount of lag in your play. It also causes you to disconnect rather rapidly. So you disconnect from the game, you reconnect, disconnect, reconnect. This has been a problem for a long time, and it is generally not the fault of the player. It's a server lag issue with the number of enemies in one region. And it was during the time when people were doing story missions that this was predominant. So there was the 10th problem on the list. Now let's get into the heavier problems when we start hitting 11. Number 11 on the list is the non-updating of the market. So the market prices don't update regularly. Now, the fact that they don't update regularly causes multiple other problems. I'll get into the next problem on the next tier of complaints. The markets don't update fast enough, so the values of items are very hard to calculate. You have to open the market and read the page and find a fair value. Now, if you wanted to give the market a fair value, all you have to do is list out the first 10 items on your page and have your computer program do a mean, or list out every single item and do a mean from all of the items to give you a fair value for the item. And that would have been the easiest way for market update of price. However, it is very difficult right now because the market doesn't update regularly and they don't update it with each patch. So there is something else which has been going wrong. Next up on the list, number 12, another major issue within the game would be auditing times. The fact that activities are based with people playing around, gathering materials, you have to do a lot of things and you have to transfer between each other when you are doing group activities. Now, to prevent people from abusing the system and making one of their accounts super rich and over the top, they put in the system of auditing. Now, auditing is fair in a way, and it's also not fair in many other ways. The auditing system bases itself off the market values, and as I said, market values don't update fast enough. The auditing system takes way too long. The auditing system doesn't really prevent high end cheating. It only prevents low end cheating within the game. So the auditing system will generally prevent someone from, let's see, it will prevent someone from transferring 300 million between each other, because it will take a day, or it will take 8 hours or 10, 20 hours for you to actually get the materials. Now this is what was really slowing players down, and it was fair in a way for some things to be audited with massive times, but auditing beyond a day doesn't make a difference. They aren't checking their audits. That is very clear, because people who are botting are still botting for ages, and they are still botting today. So yes, that is something which hasn't helped them stop botting at all. They've only caught players with multiple accounts, and multiple accounts are allowed within the game. So yeah, pretty pointless. Now moving on, the next thing, which was also another big problem. Whew, let's go. The introduction and leveling of ships. Yes. Now, this is one of the more difficult ones to explain in a simple, cohesive statement. They introduced many ships to the game. And when I say many ships, I mean they introduced guardians, assault, snipers, so forth to the game. The level of the ships don't match the level of activity they can take on their own. Now, yes, I do know it is a community play game, that you are meant to play it in numbers, but those ships can't take on the right activities in consideration to their level. Some ships were introduced way too early, some ships were introduced way too late. The faction frigates were introduced perfectly. The faction cruisers were introduced a little too early. I believe the faction cruisers shouldn't have even appeared on that page till the point where we reached T7 to make it fair. And during T8, once we finally breached through and defeated a lot of the enemies, the marketplaces should have showed the fact that battleships were available. But we shouldn't have had the ability to research battleships. That should only have come at T9. That has forced us to get endgame activity right in T8, well before we are anywhere near ready to end the game. So they basically have put us into endgame phase for this game, and we should be ready to finish off the game and be done with all of our activities. Moving on to the next aspect from there. Oh, this is such a long list. I'm actually just going to quit this list at a certain point, but let's go on to number 13, unless I'm wrong and I've already done 13 and this is 14, but let's go on to number 13. Number 13 on the list. The lack of diversity within gameplay activities. Now, when I say the lack of diversity, I mean the fact that we only have a set number of gameplay activities that are readily available to us. And that is mining, that you can do all the time, anytime, anywhere. You can mine in any system. Right? Okay, except for the ICT systems, the only place where you can't mine. Obviously, you can't rat in those systems as well. Rat is killing anomalies. Right? So there's mining, there's anomaly fighting, and there's encounter fighting. Those are the three easily available activities to all players. Now, within mining, a special type of mining belt called a condensed ore belt, they are the only thing in the game that is super, super rare and super hard to find. When I say super hard to find, I mean in all the time that I have played, I have only ever seen one belt, and it's really hard to find them. They're really valuable, and I understand why they're valuable. But the fact that they are that hard to find when you've already introduced the end game is a bit pointless, because people can mine all day long and they won't see a condensed belt, and that is not fair. Okay, so there's something which was very unfair, the reduction of mining activity in terms of no belts. Now I'm going to move on to the next one within anomalies. Anomalies, the spawn of high rate anomalies is quite difficult, right? It takes quite a bit of time. It's already counted into the previous rating. However, the fact that they count scouts, inquisitors, and dead spaces as activities means that they should be more easily available. The fact that we only have these available within certain amounts of rating on rare occasion means that they aren't a readily available activity and they shouldn't be counted as the majority of activity. So yes, instantly we remove inquisitors and dead spaces from that list, and we also remove the ability to mine big ore belts. So we're still stuck with 3 anomalies. Not anomalies, encounters. Now encounters are missions that are missions that we can complete to open storyline missions. The encounters are never ever limited. There's tons of encounters available to us, but the ability for you to open a mission is quite rare. They spawn at random, they have no fixed times, there is no way to plan around them, and the game doesn't favor the ones you don't have, so you don't always get the missions that you don't have available to you at that time. So yes, there's a major problem with that whole aspect. Right? I hope that people understand where I'm coming with what I was saying. So yes, there is one big problem. Moving on to the next problem within all of these. Number 14 on the list, right? So there is the fact that you only had 3 activities. Number 14, diversity of gameplay. Gameplay is basically focused all into one aspect, and that is combat. Most of this game is combat. Mining plays a small part. Everything that is done in mining falls into combat nonetheless, because you only mine what you need to produce. So yeah, that really makes a big problem. Mining wasn't valuable enough for the start of the game. Actually, not for the start of the game, for this point. The rare belts that should spawn don't spawn fast enough, and some activities are really poor in terms of their overall performance. You could outdo mining quite easily with ratting if one person collects all of your debris, considering that the low-end debris aren't really useful to high-end players who are focusing purely on their military aspect. If you had someone reprocessing that, they can beat miners really easily, and there is another thing to think about. Taking on high-end activities just to reprocess is a good thing for some players to do. It helps them boost up their overall power. Okay, let's move on to the next. Number 15. Okay, so we're almost done. Free SP being handed out in the game. Now, I know that I have counted a little bit on the fact that we had high-end things added in too early. The game's progression is going to be really slow. The game is set for over a 10-year progression, considering that you need 750 million SP to master all of the current skills available to us. And considering that figure is ridiculous, considering our current progression rate and how far we are, it's going to take us about 45 million a year in terms of SP. That's nowhere near good enough for us to master all activities, considering how many activities we need to learn. So in no way can you become a master player within a year or two. It's going to take multiple years. The game is too long period. Now the free SP is helping us close that gap a little bit, and it is what has pulled us up to this particular rate of increase. So what would the devs need to do? Well, they are going to need to actually improve our SP gain even more. Why? They're going to need to make sure that this game has a 1.5 to 2 year max SP. Now, why do they need us to reach 1.5 to 2 years? So they can introduce more extreme ships, more extreme activities. Yes, I do know that there is the possibility of them going into the expanse of wormholes and outer systems. The outer systems do show up on our maps from time to time, but we can't reach them because there is no way to reach them. Now, those have been removed from the current map, so you can't see what was available in terms of black hole jumping. So that we're going to have to get when we get to that point. Okay, moving on. The next thing which is wrong, and this is the 16th on my list, is going to be the format of gameplay. Now, format of gameplay is going to be the fact that teams can only run as a maximum of 10, when you could have very large teams quite easily, and you could have a proper PvP activity added to the game. Now, when I say a PvP activity, I mean like a combat arena or a fighting station or something like that. Introduce it in a safe zone so that players can't get ganked outside with their super expensive ships. So you come in with the ship, you're obviously risking a ship in the PvP fight. You have 4 tiers of fighting. You have a ISK reward issued in each one of them. So basically it's from the devs. You get 5 tries a day, so you can make a maximum amount of ISK or you can make no ISK. It's basically a big risk. You jump in, you take your fight, you have to repair your ship after each round. That is your stuff. If you take on the maximum high level activity, it's almost equal to the value of a ship. That's what you can get in terms of ISK. So yes, that would be a fair PvP activity. It would be something that they could introduce to the game. It's quite easy to introduce it. They just have to introduce a new building, a new area like the museum, a nice big structure in a place where you enter. Welcome to the Grand Colosseum. Would you like to take part in combat? And this would be so much easier. Instead of players like myself, Yukita, I'm forgetting the name of the player of the other content creators. I'm really sorry, but there's a few of them who do PvP and host activities on the main server. Those players are the only ones who actually take part in PvP. They actually make it fun. They have a contest, they give away something, and those are things that you can do to really pull players into the game. Heavy contest in the station, frigates only, heavy contest in the station, battleships only. You allow players to see what those ships can do. Unlike a showcase from just a content creator, everybody can flood there. You can have everybody up on view. You can have a special view stream on Twitch where people can see what's happening in the fights. People could be streaming it on YouTube. All of this is available. It's free publicity for the game. They could have done something like this for PvP, but it's not in the game at the moment. So yeah, I'm just going to continue. Moving on, number 17. Number 17 is going to be the fact that several types of high-end ship legions aren't in the game. Now, I'm saying several. I'm saying the Ken Yu type, the Yen Yu Corporation or Zen Yu Corporation. I'm forgetting what it's called. The Sisters of Eve and the Mortis Legion. Those 3 special anomaly types are not available in the game at the moment, but their ships are blatantly available for us to look at. It makes them really pointless to get. When they are finally introduced, they're going to be very late in the game. They aren't going to be as effective as their counterparts, and players are going to be very used to other formats of gameplay. So they should have already been introduced so that players could keep up their regular format of play instead of forcing players to increase their spend. Right. Now, number 18 on the list, let's continue on. I'm actually getting really bored of making this list. I do know that I'm good at listing out this. I'm going to make a list of 20 good features about the game afterwards. Okay, number 18. Let's see. This is where things get a bit difficult. UI changes. The current UI in the game is very condensed. Now they did expand it because it was too condensed originally, and it allowed us to actually select what we were selecting very easily. You could open the map or you could open the menu quite simply by using that distance. However, they've condensed it once more, making it very, very close to each other. So a lot of the times when you're trying to open the UI for the menu, you end up opening the map. And that's because they are so close together that a small nick from your finger to the side will open the map instead of opening your character. And that is something which they didn't think about when they made it small once again. Small UI problem, there's it. Number 19, gate problems. Now, a lot of players transit through the map and they get stuck in gates. It happens a lot. It costs people ships, it costs people a lot of things that aren't really important. Now, when it comes to the replacement program within the game, loot isn't generally returned in 100%. It's only whatever wasn't destroyed. Now, the fact that it's a glitch means that you should return it all. And a lot of players do lose a lot of high-end equipment from their ships. 100, 200, 300 million easily lost from their ships during these activities when a mechanic like this happens. And that is why players wanted gates to be safe spots, so that these simple mechanics wouldn't be a problem. So yes, their error in the game has cost a lot of players a lot of time. And when you consider how much it can cost a player, let's say for example you're running around in a Badger or a Tyra and you're transporting 5 battleships, not battleships, faction ships, 5. That is 5 billion at the very least. It's almost 10 billion to be honest. And you get stuck in a gate. You're stuck in the gate, you can't get out, you log out, by the time you log back in, someone kills you. Whose fault was it? Wasn't your fault, there was a game glitch mechanic. From that entire destruction, the 3 ships are left in loot boxes, they get someone else there with the loot ship, they pick it up and they're gone. They replace whatever was lost for you because it was the gate stuck mechanic, and they don't replace the ships that fell. You literally lost billions because the game developers made a mistake. And I don't think that that was fair. I don't think that is fair, and that should definitely be fixed. And right on, here goes the last of that list, number 20. Number 20, there is no clear path for this game in terms of story. The story exists. When you first start the game, there is dialogue, vocal dialogue for you to follow. However, once you start the game, the dialogue disappears. You don't get to interact with the NPCs in the missions, the storyline missions, nobody. There is no dialogue. The dialogues aren't very long, so it's quite quick, and it's not like you're going to have to keep updating dialogue because you're updating activities. So yes, there was short dialogue that they could have had, a little bit of extra spend on the side of the studio. They could even introduce it now, it still would make a difference. But no dialogue in those activities when there's dialogue to start the game. It's a really poor show from the company. It shows that they weren't really thinking of keeping the game around for very long. That's what people would generally think. And that there really says a lot about the game. It had the potential to be really, really great. It could have been the next big thing on the mobile platform, but instead it fell short due to a lot of small, simple errors made in quick planning or quick trying to save money for the game. So yeah, there goes my list of 20 problems within the game that are annoying to most of the player base. So I hope that you all have enjoyed, and if you do have other problems, remember this is my point of view. Some of my problems that I listed aren't really as big as they seem from my point of view, but yeah, you can definitely put up your points of view at the bottom of this. It would be welcome for you to say what problems you're having. Don't say that I'm whining. This is a developer challenge given out to the content creators. They asked us for a list of 20, and I suspect that most content creators will make a video on it. Now I'm going to make a list of 20 things done well within the game. So let's see what comes out. Thank you all for watching. Have a good day.